Welcome to Retro Review. My name is 808 and in this series I review some classic games from my collection to let you know whether they're still any good, if they're hard to come by, and if you should consider picking them up. In this episode I'll be reviewing Decathlete for the Sega Saturn. Decathlete, or Athlete Kings depending on which country you're in, was originally released for the arcade back in 1994. The Saturn version came out a year later in 95 and at the time it was generally well received. Reviewers praised the game for being faithful to the arcade version, which was largely made possible due to Sega's STV board. The STV arcade board and the Saturn's hardware are almost identical, and this made porting arcade games that use the STV board to Sega's console a pretty straightforward task. Decathlete features 8 playable characters, and 9 if you include the hidden character in the Japanese version. There are 10 Olympic events that mimic those found in the real Olympic decathlon, and they include the 100 metres, 400 metres, 1500 metres, long jump, shot put, discus, pole vault, javelin, hurdles, and the high jump. While all the events are true to an actual Olympic decathlon, this is where the game's realism ends. All of the 8 character designs are pretty out there, and both men and women can compete in the same event. Decathlete features 3 game modes. Arcade lets you play the game as it appeared in the arcades, where there are 10 events split across 2 days. You choose 5 events to start with on the first day, and you'll need to qualify in each event in order to move on to day 2. Decathlete mode is a little more forgiving. It lets you compete in all 10 events regardless of how poorly you do. This is definitely a welcome addition because although most events are pretty easy and can be completed by using 1 or 2 buttons, there are a couple that can be quite challenging. The last mode is practice mode, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You pick one of the 10 events to practice on with as many retries as you like until you get it perfect. Controls vary from one event to the next, but most of them require some form of rapid button mashing, and this is particularly true with the running events. Decathlete is very hard on your fingers, and I should probably warn you that this game has a tendency to break fragile controllers. Although the majority of events are easy enough to learn, there are a couple that are considerably more difficult. The pole vault, for instance, is definitely one of the more challenging events. You'll need to master speed, timing, and sharp input skills just to complete it properly, let alone come close to the world record. On the upside, failing at this event is almost more entertaining than succeeding, and this is true with most of the events, failing to make a hurdle jump and simply running through them to clinch victory being one of the more hilarious examples. Thankfully, there is a brief tutorial before each event to refresh your memory or to help inform new players of what they need to do. Decathlete can be played solo against the computer, and although it can be challenging, the real fun is with 2 or more players. Despite being only 2 players at once, it's a surprisingly fun party game. It's easy for just about anyone to pick up and learn how to play. Most events are over pretty quickly too, some in under 10 seconds, so even if you have to pass the controller around, you're never waiting long. Like any good party game, you'll be literally breaking a sweat by the end of a session, and it's not uncommon to sustain some kind of injury after any prolonged play. Unlike other sports franchises of the day, such as International Track and Field, Decathlete has a very stylized and over-the-top look. The game as a whole doesn't take itself too seriously, which really lends itself to the casual party game style. Visually it's not going to drop any jaws, but it still holds up pretty well, and it's one of the better looking 3D Saturn games. The audio on the other hand is a bit hit and miss. The grunts and victory quotes from each of the characters is pretty amusing, but the chanting from the crowd gets old quickly. The music is pretty cheesy too, but it is a good match for the overall aesthetic of the game. This game is pretty easy to find in NTSC format, and at the time of me making this video, it will probably set you back about $10 to $15. It can be a little bit harder to find in PAL, so expect to pay about double that. I can highly recommend this game if you own a Saturn and if you're a fan of party games. It's a good example of what the Saturn is capable of, and it has stood the test of time as far as gameplay is concerned. So all up, I give Athlete Kings, or Decathlete, 8 out of 10. If you've got any questions about this game that I haven't answered, or you've got a suggestion for a game for me to cover in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later.